Hello, everybody, and welcome to the afternoon tune. I am host Josh, and I got a special interview today. Going to be interviewing Professor John Jennings. John Jennings, Hugo Award winning, Eisner winning professor, scholar, best-selling author, curator, graphic novelist, editor, design theorist, all-around expert on everything comics. Uh, how's it going there, Mr. Jennings?
How you doing, Josh? Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good. It's a little rainy out here in sunny California, but we're making it. So
Oh, very good. I know I gave you that intro, but you want to tell the people about yourself, who you are, where you're from, things like that?
yeah, sure. My name is John Jennings. As Josh said, I'm a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California at Riverside. Um, as far as like my work, I do a lot of work around representations of Blackness in comics and science fiction and horror, right? So here I teach courses on Afrofuturism and comics. I teach a course on Black horror, and just a general course just about like comics and contemporary culture. And originally, I'm from Mississippi, born and raised, and went to school at Jackson State University, finished up at University of Illinois, and have been teaching for about 20 years or so. And most of my work was as an artist. I was trained as an artist, so I was teaching the graphic design programs for about 16 years, and then I switched over to teaching media studies. But I'm also a editor and curator at Abrams Megascope, which is a imprint that I founded that deals with people of color and speculative fiction. And so we've been doing that for almost 5 years now. And I'm also a graphic novelist working with my friend Damian Duffy. We've adapted two of Octavia Butler's, soon to be three of Octavia Butler's science fiction stories. That's Kindred and Parable of the Sword, and we're working on Parable of Talents now. So
Very good. And this is the Megascope site right here, abramsbooks.com, that people can check it out, and everything like that. And this is also your own personal site right here,
yes.
so that people can check out, learn more about you. Um, and how I found you was from this right here, which was My Superhero is Black, which is talking about all the various kind of different Black superheroes there within comic books. And yeah,
Within excuse me, Marvel Comics in particular.
yes, Marvel
Yeah,
Comics
yeah, yeah.
in particular there, and you see various ones: Nick Fury, Black Panther. You see Moon Girl there, which I actually just saw her show right there. Very good show, by the way.
It's actually well done. Yeah. Yes.
That's on Disney Plus right now. Yes, is that that's Isaiah Bradley, correct? Or
Let's see. Yes, that's Isaiah Bradley. Yep. And
yeah,
Blue Marble. And some of your leading characters that is co-written with my good friend Angelique Roche, and we are currently finishing up edits and stuff on that. So thank you for your patience because it's not out yet. It'll be out. I don't know. Hopefully soon. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and make sure to be picking up a copy of that. Yeah. Have you done much convention work, going out to things like that to convention?
Yeah. I generally am at San Diego Comic Con pretty much every year, and in a capacity or in some capacity. A lot of people don't realize this, but there's also like a scholarly aspect to San Diego Comic Con. They actually have this thing called the Comics Art Conference, and that's how I started going to it. It's actually a separate event that actually is also owned by Comic Con International, where professors can go and talk about their work. So that's actually how I started going to Comic Cons, and because I do both, I'm an artist and a scholar. I was able to kind of segue into doing comics that way. But yeah, I mean, I go to San Diego, New York Comic Con. I've been to quite a bit. I actually helped co-organize and create Black comic book conventions too, like the one in Harlem at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I'm one of the co-founders of that, which is like probably the largest Black convention in the country. And then CamCon, which is at the California African American Museum. I have co-found that, and also the the Black and Brown Comic Arts Festival in San Francisco, to name a few. So I've been not only do I go to the conferences, but also like I help create them for us essentially. So
Yeah. And you've been doing this for multiple decades now, right? Working in comics.
yeah, I mean, I think a couple of decades now. I mean, I think I just made a couple like 20 some odd years. I started doing independent work. Me and my friend Damien started out as comic scholars doing curatorial work, right? So we the first big thing that we did was this show called Out of Sequence: Underrepresented Voices in American Comics, and it was a curated exhibition that we did at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign back in the early 2000s, like 2008 or so. And from there, we kind of segued into doing experimental comics, and then before you know it, we ended up getting a chance to adapt Octavia Butler's Kindred into a graphic novel, which was our first like major project. But before then, we were doing independent work. We were doing a lot of experimental stuff. We're doing like interactive comics and comics that are projected on walls, just kind of messing around with the medium. But as I said before, I was, my main gig was like I was teaching, so I was doing like design history and stuff like that too. But I always wanted to do, yep, do like graphic design. I mean, graphic novels and stuff. So
Mm. Yeah, so
that's
this is the out of sequence there right here, the painting
yeah.
installation. Very, very nice, very well done there. To check out. Yeah. Since you've been in it for a minute now, do you notice a lot more black creatives kind of coming up than you did before when you kind of started out there?
Yes, I have. So one of the things that was interesting is like when we started working on just surveying, like just a representation of people from different backgrounds, not only like race, but also like sexual preference, gender, class, even. We were looking at like, well, who's making comics and how are they getting the work out. And that's when I discovered Hero Talk, and the Museum of Black Superheroes that Omar Bilal created. It was online back in the day. And Hero Talk was like the message boards. And so a lot of the brothers and sisters that were on there back in the day, became really good friends. And, we would get into discussions about that. Um, and also there was a major conference that still goes on called the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, ECBAC, which is at Temple University. It's the oldest, Black comic book convention. It's in Philadelphia, and that's where the Glyph Awards are given out, which is like almost like I guess it's almost like the Image Awards of comics. It's like the Image Awards and Eisner's put together, for
Oh,
comics. So
okay.
yeah, and that's given out at that convention. So that's kind of like where we started, is kind of looking at the lay of the land. And I think because of the fact that um, the tools to make comics actually became a lot more affordable, as far as like being able to afford like the Adobe Creative Suite and stuff like that. And also too, like major advances in like drawing digitally and things like that. And actually like the growth of the internet, I think, was a huge deal too. Like as far as like being and so we moved out of the chat rooms and being like the only Black person in the comics to having like a whole community with like social media, right? And I
Mhm.
think the last big thing I think was uh, printing on demand technology, being actually able to take your ideas and put them up and print them out and actually sell them at conventions and stuff. So that, I think, those different things helped like propel us into the space we are now, where you have like extremely gifted Black creators who are making a living and doing some great work that is on par with and better actually in some instances than the big two are putting out, as far as like story and things of that nature. So yeah, I think we're in kind of like the golden age of the Black age of comics, so to speak. It's like there's a lot of really good work out there.
Yeah. And like I say, seeing a lot more people, seeing a lot more black people in this space now. Any advice you want to kind of say to them at all? Of, like,
Well, I mean, it's funny because looking at the political climate, I'd be like, stay safe, and but speak your truth. But the other thing is, don't quit, because if it's something that you love, then you should not stop doing it. It's one of the things that I kind of lament is like when I came out of school, I was trying to I was trying to like draw like someone else. I was trying to be like Neil Adams clone, or like that kind of thing. I would say like make the work the way that you need to make it. You know what I'm saying? And keep making it because there's an audience out there for you. You know. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I would say.
Okay. So your work, so you being a professor at UCR, University of California at Riverside, there, you work with specifically, examining media from a black lens, examining a lot of that things. So, what do you kind of usually do in your classes? Do you take typically a black film, and then do you kind of have the students break it down in a
That's right.
way? Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. So yeah, so we're in a so media and cultural studies is a program. It's kind of a young program. That kind of like grew out of film studies and like literary studies, like comparative literature. So what you'll have is like a lot of professors who are into different media, who might be English professors or they might be film studies professors who are treating that like another type of text, like a traditional text. And so, like you said, they start breaking it down. They start thinking about the symbolism of it. They're thinking about like production side of things. And the other thing, a bunch of us are also makers of media. So we have like people who are musicians in our program. We have people who design games, right, in our program. Practicing artists, filmmakers, dancers. Who are also scholars who are actually doing critical making and actually studying the medium like that. So we teach the students to not only be like makers of things, but be really, really cognizant of the um, the systems that produce, media, that kind of thing. So for instance, right now I'm teaching my a class called Afrofuturism and the Visual Cultures of Horror, right?
mm,
The students call it the Get Out class. So yeah,
okay.
so we
Yeah.
basically will look at like representations of blackness in horror films, and then we have like a bevy of like readings and films that we engage with, but also comics too, because we're talking about images, right? So we like for instance, this last week we talked about the idea of being able to slip in and out of people's bodies, right? What does that mean on a psychological level, on a when you consume someone's body by actually literally being in their flesh, that kind of thing, right? So Get Out, we looked at a film like Jezebel. We looked at the film Spell. We also looked at Talk to Me, things like that, where there's some type of power that allows you to kind of slip in and out of the body. So what happens is like you can actually wear someone else's skin without having the repercussions of actually being that person, So it's like this really, really tripped out fantasy. So these are some of the things we talk about in the courses, and then what are the social forces that create these things. So yeah.
Yeah. And hello, how's it going there, Mike Edgewood? He's a animator himself. He does a lot of media there, so up and coming animator, great
Oh,
works there. So shout out to him. So yeah, you're starting to see, like you said, like that, a bloom of, I guess, a newer term. I guess a lot of people are throwing around now, Afro futurism. A lot of that people threw out with Black Panther,
mhm,
with that film there. And you also see that with a lot of kind of horror kind of going in that. Jordan Peele obviously is an example of that.
mhm.
Um, and did you see the movie? You probably already have Candyman at all?
Yeah, yeah. We actually I taught both of them, in my class actually.
Uh,
The original and the spiritual sequel. Yes, Yeah.
And this one, so there was 2 versions. There was the original one. The original one was directed by a white director, and then this one was directed by a black female director, Nia DaCosta, who went on to do the Marvels there.
Mhm,
And one of the criticisms with this movie was that it focused, and this was also coming from black people, so it focused maybe too much on a racial aspect there, as far as maybe it was too heavy-handed. If black people are in something that is horror or sci-fi, it has to relate back to their blackness. Do you ever feel like that is an issue at all? Of like, why, if it's a slasher movie, why can't just be okay? Black people are just in the woods, and then it's a slasher. Instead, the slasher has to be a metaphor for racism. Do you
mhm.
ever encounter any issue like that?
I mean, I go back and forth about it. Yeah, because we are more than the skin we're in. I think that with Candyman though, because of the fact that it is like derived from a story that was dealing directly with race, that it makes sense to me for the sequel to do so. So many of those particular systems are connected to racism. I mean, I thought it was a far more nuanced film than the first one. I actually thought it was a better film in a lot of ways, actually, because I had a lot of issues with the first Candyman. Like, why was Candyman actually like haunting black people? He should have been actually killing white folk if that was how he was lynched and such stuff like that. I always had issues with that. I feel like Nia DaCosta did a really great, like, nuanced conversation, and she didn't know, and not to pardon the pun, but she didn't let anybody off the hook, so to speak, right? Because she was actually talking about like how everyone actually kind of like profits off of Black people's trauma. She was actually talking, I think, a lot about gentrification and things of that nature. But what I liked about the film is that she didn't actually really show us the violence. It was always, reflections of the violence and that kind of thing. She would show us shadows, and she would actually kind of, you know, show us a scance of the violence. I thought it was a very well lensed film, personally, but I do see the critique as far as like why does it always have to be about race? And I think what it is that we're still unpacking what it means to be Black and be subject as well. I
Mm.
mean, we're in a renaissance of like us being seen. You know, um, for a long time we were not in films at all, and then when we do get to films, we're killed off or we're treated as side characters. So I think we're in an age now where we're still trying to figure out how to be the center of the conversation. Which I think is really interesting. So yeah, so we're still like going through those things, but I felt like I don't think it was heavy handed at all. I thought it was really beautifully executed and very subtle. In fact, I feel like the shadow puppet show at the end of it was one of the most heart wrenching things I've ever seen because it was showing us racialized violence without actually showing us gore, and because it was showing like these actual violences against Black men. Yes, exactly. Um, without actually showing, blood or like gore, and that was I think the makings of a she's the makings of a really brilliant filmmaker actually. I think that yeah, she's a very very smart woman. So and
Uh,
and you can see like the homage to the first one, but also just picking up on the things. I just felt like it was a really strong film. But anyway, let me stop. So
yeah. I love this sequence too. I love the what they do there with the kind of the art there with it. I
oh
love
yeah,
it.
it's beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a lot of care. I feel like Peel, Monkey Paw, this whole like over that he's created is a lot more subtlety, because we are Black people living in this space, and we are still trying to deal with like the trappings of race and things of that nature. That's still a problem. And honestly, I really don't have an issue with propaganda about what happens to Black people in the country. I feel like sometimes we need to be a little bit louder, in fact, because if you look around us right now, we're in a political climate that is extremely volatile. So I'm like, well, I don't have time to actually make art. I need to make some statements. So
Mm.
my art always has statements in it. I make work about the social issues that deal with my people, but also like just in general. But I do see what you're saying. Like we should just be able to make a film that's like, it's a monster movie. The black because your blackness is apparent just because of being who you are, right? Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. So I do understand the escapism nature of it. If somebody want to go to a theater and then be like, okay, I just want to relax, I want to chill out, and I mean, just see, like you said, just a monster movie. The monster attacks. And then it's like it's Scooby Doo. The monster takes off the hood, and then boom, it's white supremacy. You know what I mean? It's like okay,
right.
So I kind of get that in a sense there with some people in the complaint. And with you said you speak about this politically charged climate that we're in right now,
Mm,
and a word that kind of gets thrown around in that politically charged climate, is something like wokeness, is something like that kind of there.
yeah.
What do you what's kind of your opinion on that? And do you think that media literacy is an issue with that as far as people interpreting things of what is and what isn't woke?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, actually, Josh. So first of all, I think media literacy is extremely valuable. It's extremely important, and I think that it should be taught super early because kids are inundated with so many images, before they're like able to actually process them. I remember reading something about like um, we see more images in a day than someone from the 17th century would see in their entire lifetime,
Right.
right?
That makes
Something
sense.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which totally makes sense. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Just when you think about it, so we don't have time to rest and actually like think about what we're actually processing. So I think that media literacy should be taught like super early, like as soon as we could, because the formations of who we are start so early on. Um, as far as like the term woke, I mean, it's funny because that is a term that comes out of the Black community that has been reappropriated by right wing anti-progressives. You know what I'm saying? And actually, I have to commend them for it. I mean, it was done brilliantly. Because now it's been turned into this bad thing, right? But I'm like, well, okay, well, I would rather you okay, the opposite of being woke is being asleep.
Right.
So you're saying you want people to be ignorant or unconscious then, so I'm like, okay, fine, stay unconscious and I'll just continue making the work that I do that I feel will hopefully change things in this society. um yeah, I think it was a really brilliant turn of phrase. I mean, I hate that it happened that way, but a lot of times folk in those spaces are really good wordsmiths and actually able to like spin are really good at like being spin doctors, because even the term social justice warrior it's been turned into like a bad thing. I was like, so let me get this straight. So Rosa Parks and Dr. King, that's bad now. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So it's this really strange wordplay. Um, I feel that we're in a space now where we have to be really, careful about the stuff that we say because on social media, what have you. But also, I really feel like we should always try to speak truth to power and make the work that we feel we should be making in the world, regardless of who's saying what about it. Um, it's also kind of heartbreaking because we're like the most connected that we've ever been as a people, like as a society.
Mm.
But because of the fact that certain folk make particular money from us being separated, that we actually don't get a chance to see what we have in common with everybody else. And I think that's something that has been really, really used very well to kind of separate. This is one of the most segregated like political climates I've ever seen in my life, at this particular point in history, you know. And I think it's a shame because our democracy is in danger and the world is watching because we're still an experiment. So
Yeah.
it's like still a democratic experiment. So yeah, we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, by the way, Afrofuturism isn't a new term. It was coined in the 1990s, like 1993.
okay. So
There's been
not a
a
real.
resurgence of it, I think, because of different things. I think this new interest in Afrofuturism probably started with the election of Barack Obama. That's my theory because before his election, you would only see a black president in a science fiction movie, if you think
Right.
about it. And so I feel like when people saw Obama as like a president in the present, they were like, "Wow, we're in the future now. Racism is over." And it's like not at all, actually. And so now we've seen like this gradual swing back to the right, like the extreme right in some spaces, because there's a fear of loss of identity as far as like what America is and what America means, to certain people, right? So
You speak about the loss of identity, how some people fear that, and you see that kind of reaction online when you do have characters. Knowing your cover here, my superhero is black.
mhm,
You do have the character of Miles Morales here, Spider Man,
mhm,
which people fear that what I mean. People say no, Peter Parker is Spider Man, Miles Morales is Miles Morales, and you know what I mean. He will always be that, and it seems like a kind of fear that or anger that people he's coming up, he's popular right now. Probably one of the most popular variants of a character that we've seen, especially like we've seen, it's been done before, I
yeah,
mean, Sam Wilson,
mhm,
Captain America, various kind of there, Isaiah Bradley, but, never before have we, this character has his own video game series, movie series, and he hasn't
yeah,
even been introduced into live action. And this character really isn't relatively even that old. He's only about a little over a decade old, this
yeah, yeah.
character.
I want to say what 2011 is when he was created. I think
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
So what's kind of your opinion on, because usually what these people will say is, if you want black characters, create black characters, but when you try to make more of a push and effort to create original more black characters, it's like, okay, that's forced and it's diversity and it's forced diversity. Where
Forced diversity.
yeah, what's kind of your opinion there on that?
First of all, no one talks about the force homogeneity, right?
Right.
Because yeah, as far as like like the forced homogenous nature of characters, right? I mean, if anybody is like extremely overrepresented, is like straight white men are like really over. represented, right? But that's become normalized because of the amount of media around them, right? And don't get me wrong. I mean, I love like Spider-Man is one of my favorite. Like Peter Parker is one of my absolute favorite characters. In fact, my favorite character, like superhero, is Daredevil. I love that character since I was 12, right? So I just want to get that straight. So this is complex because in comics you have this idea called a legacy character, right?
Right.
And so that could be a character that either is directly connected to a superhero character, like the Phantom, for instance, is probably one of the first, maybe the first, like legacy character, from the 1930s,
Yes.
where his son would actually take the mantle of the Phantom, right? And then
Mhm.
of course you have like a character that's inspired by the character, or like a revamping of the character, like Barry Allen takes up the mantle from Jay Garrick, right, which is the
Yeah.
beginning of the Silver Age, right? So these are some of your these are different versions of the legacy character. And so I've been talking to my friend Michael Norton Dando about this because he's working on a book about the Blue Beetle, which is, the current iteration is a legacy character called, was it Jaime Reyes, right?
Just had a movie come out last year.
Is that a movie come out? Exactly. So what we've been talking about, this is something that he's thinking, this is directly connected to how Dando is thinking about it, is that this these characters are like heirlooms. They're like they're like indexes of nostalgia, they're indexes of identity, right? Because we think about it, the superhero is an American construct, and ever since the 1950s, when Superman said he stands for truth, justice, and the American way, right?
Right.
The superhero is an American construct. So that means that, everybody who's in America actually should probably have a superhero that represents them for good or ill, whatever that means, right? So that's one thing I think, because that comes from like the 1950s. So what's interesting about like what's jumping off with mainstream comics now is because of the fact that the big two are not comic book companies anymore, that they don't they're like their intellectual property management, kind of businesses to a certain degree, where Spider-Man is an IP. He's an intellectual property. It's a wonderful character, but licensing is where Marvel and DC gets most of their money from. That's where the most of their funds come from. So you're in a particular space where like superheroes, they traffic in a particular type of commodified nostalgia,
Mhm.
right? Where like, oh, I want to. This reminds me of my childhood. And so what happens is like you project part of yourself onto this thing, like your commodity self is like, oh, like I'm a Doctor Who fan, right? So I'm thinking, oh, Doctor Who, right?
Mhm.
Um, because it's a part of you. And so when people start changing things, you're like, oh, that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel like you're taking something from me, right?
Yes.
Never think of like gaining something, right? So yeah, so it's hard to actually like update those characters too, because guess what? The readership for comics has dwindled. Like this is not the golden age of comics, right? There's no such thing as mainstream comics from that particular standpoint. The way I look at it,
Mm.
case in point, when the Green Lantern movie came out, the one with Ryan Reynolds,
Reynolds?
right?
Yeah.
My mother called me and she was like, "You ever heard of Green Lantern?" And I was like, yes, he's actually one of the most popular superheroes ever created. She's like, oh yeah, I think I might check it. I like Ryan Reynolds, right?
Mm.
My wife is an X-Men fan of the movies because she thought that they were based on the cartoons. Didn't even know that they were comic books, right?
Mm.
So we're talking about something that's really, actually, really niche. Everybody ain't rushing to this. Everybody don't have a Wednesday pull or a Tuesday pull like we have, right? They're not mainstream characters. They have their mainstream intellectual properties, and people have so much investment in them. It's mind blowing to me. So it's very difficult to actually get somebody to get behind a new character. I just created a new character called Ghostlight, right, for
Mm.
Marvel. Brand new black character that came out of the Silver Surfer universe. So a character like Miles Morales, there's a lot of folk who that is their Spider-Man, right? Because of the fact that he's extremely popular in video games and things of that nature. Think of the superhero now as a franchise. Okay. So like that symbol on their chest isn't just an emblem anymore, it's a logo, right? So what's happening is the same thing that's always happened in American capitalism, is that if something is successful, they're going to change it a little bit and make different versions of it, right? So think of like Peter Parker as like Coca-Cola. So now you got cherry Coke, Diet Coke. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's the same kind of idea, because that is where their money is coming from. It's not from selling comic books. It's from the licensing of those characters. So you can't change them a lot. So even when, for instance, when Peter Parker got his black and white costume that later became the symbiote costume, right? That costume no matter how dope it is, because we know it's beautiful,
Right.
they couldn't keep him in that costume because guess what? How many people have actually paid for the license of the version of the red and blue costume? Like how many people, how other businesses that Marvel has partnerships with, right? So these are the conversations when I see this, I'm like, you know, no, people are not gonna get that. What was the last successful like superhero like that is a big superhero that isn't a legacy character from either one of the big two, like a brand new superhero that everybody knows about? Like, what is that character?
Um, yeah. I
Was it
I
Deadpool?
um,
Like,
like, you
what's the
said, ha
last dope character that's hot that's not a legacy character?
the Guardians? Guardians of the Gal
The Guardians of the Galaxy? Guardians
Yeah,
of the Galaxy were created in 1970s.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Try to
they're like Space Avengers. I used to collect it when I was young. I was young once. So
Yeah,
when it's like so Martin X, Starhawk, Yondu, those are my Guardians, right? So this new Guardians those are old characters. All right, so let's do it again. Like what's a new character? It's
mm.
probably Deadpool, right?
Probably, yeah, I guess that,
But
yeah.
because of the movies,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
I mean, because I didn't like Deadpool in the comic books. He's hilarious. I love Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool because he's so derivative. He's like Spider Man and like the Deathstroke the Terminator mixed with like Wolverine.
right.
It's super derivative, right? So what I'm saying is that even that is like even Deadpool's like that's a long time ago. If he was created in the early '90s, right? That's still like what over 20 some years, 30 years, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
So we're watching stories that have been created in the 1960s, or earlier, right?
Yeah,
Spider-Man was created in 1963.
yeah,
Batman was created in 1939, for
yeah,
God's sake,
before,
right?
yeah.
So these are old ideas that people are just not catching up to. So you know, there's a ton of them, and people have this love for them and stuff like that. But honestly, I like the idea that they have like these different versions of characters because that's what we do. They're just different aspects of the same character. Because guess what? I think that Marvel would love to make, or DC would love to make like brand new characters, but guess what? People don't really like new stuff. They
Mm,
say they do, but 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be like, well, I want to go see the new Star Wars movie because they're trying to actually reignite that lightning in the bottle, but at the same time, you want to change it a little bit, but still keep it the same because that's what people want. They don't necessarily want anything that's really brand new, as
mm,
far as I could tell. So yeah, it missed me with that nonsense. I'm like, no, no, you don't want new characters. You want the same character, or maybe you even want a character that's. So some people want like a black version of Superman, but we have Icon for God's sake. We have that. We have so many black superheroes like that are like we have like Blue Marvel is a Superman analog for God's sake. So Blue Marvel was created when was Blue Marvel created? But he's
uh,
not super popular. Like people don't know the character as
yeah,
well as
you
say.
really gotta know comics to know,
That's what I'm saying. So
Blue
like, and
Marvel.
people don't know comics like that.
His first appearance was in 2008.
2008. So check this out. Do you know who Raina Telgemeier is?
No, I wouldn't say I do.
Raina Telgemeier is one of the biggest selling graphic novelists in the world. She writes for kids. She
Mm,
outsells Dark Knight. She outsells Watchmen, right? Raina
mm,
Telgemeier. She has stories called like Ghost, Smile. People's kids are reading them left and right? Diary of a Wimpy Kid has sold 250 million copies worldwide. That's what's running comics. The other thing that's dominating comics right now is, of course, what do you call it? Webtoons, right? So people are not stopping reading comics. It's just that we hold on. There you go. That's Raina. True story. She actually sprained her wrist in Texas signing books. She has to wear a brace on her arm now because she hurt herself signing books.
mm,
Right. She's one of the top selling graphic novels in the country.
wow.
Right. So anyway, that's that. I'm done. Yeah. So I think I don't. People get in their feelings about it, but it's because they have this really strong connection to this fictional character. Personally, I get more. I'm really into creating my own intellectual property. It's like I'm like that Blade movie is going to happen. Fine. They own that character. If they make some out of Ghostlight, guess what? I was work for hire. They own Ghostlight. If they want to do something with them, fine. That's cool too. I'm going to watch Peter Parker and Miles Morales. I'm going to watch like a Marvel movie and Ms. Marvel. I like both the characters. I'm like, there's room for all of it. I think it's just it's funny to me that people still have these conversations online that I used to have when I was like 10. So
Yeah, and you speak about that, like, the symbol being, it's all about the intellectual property,
Yeah,
and you see that with something like Madam Web here, of with Sony, they have partial control, majority control over Spider-Man and Spider-Man IP, and
that's
you
right.
they just seems like, they wanna make just more Spider-Man stuff. They wanna do a Kraven the Hunter movie, they wanna do Venom movies, they wanna do
They have to though.
something. They have
Yeah,
to in
they
order
have
to
to
control.
actually
You're
keep
right.
control of the character. Yeah, so I think what is it, every 5 years they have to make a movie or something like that?
I believe so.
Yeah, yeah, so they have to, so it's, even if it's a bad movie, they gotta make a movie, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, because they wanna keep Spider-Man because that's the deal, you know?
yeah,
People can realize that these things are being made not because of the fact that people want them, because people be like, "Who wanted the Echo TV show?" You know? They probably have a contract that actually demands that they make a certain amount of intellectual property or else, right?
right.
Regardless of what you want it or not, right?
Yeah,
So that's the thing. It's like the market is all these different things already set, you know. So yeah, I didn't want to Madam. I'm like Madam Web, the old lady in the chair.
yeah,
I'm like, really? We gonna make that movie? Okay. You
yeah,
know, Venom. I have not seen the Venom movies. I don't like Venom as a character. I always thought it was a plot point that became a character. A lot of stuff that happened in the '90s, I was not a big fan of. And so I'm older than, I'm like Generation X. So, so I started reading comics like in the '80s, like late '70s, early '80s. So I seen like a sea change of things happen. The '90s was a bad decade for comics in the mainstream, I feel,
yeah,
but we also got stuff like, Vertigo Comics. We got Milestone. We got some really interesting things too. But too many the same thing that's happening with like with Marvel movies right now happened to Marvel with the comics. Too many crossovers. You know, a glut of too much stuff coming out that sometimes was up and down with quality. And it was putting a lot of strain on the creators. And that's why Image was formed, because they were like, you know what? We quit. We're gonna start our own company.
yeah.
And now we got The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, you kinda see that you mentioned just the companies, the corporations putting this crackdown of just like more, 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 just pumping it out
right.
because it's like, well, this is what people want, you know what I mean? They're making all this money, and that's the end at the bottom line, end of the day, it's about the money. And it's about, creating all these different various video games, shows, movies, everything like that to capitalize off of that.
That's
Not
right.
necessarily always the creator's fault there of things.
Most time it's not. I mean, a lot of times there's a lot of pressure on people to make these things, and people got to eat. We're in a space where everything is fungible, which means everything is consumable. Even our identities, are up for sale. Literally, like our very DNA, we have to like, subscribe to Ancestry DNA so we can learn about ourselves. I mean, it's crazy. We live in this topsy turvy like Blade Runner world. you know, like it's crazy. So yeah, so yes, when people are saying like they should do this, I saw this one post, I forgot where it was, about like if Marvel like really believed that, Miles Morales was the Spider-Man, that they would just kill Peter Parker. And I was like, not if Sony has anything to do with it. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? I was like, no, I mean, because Marvel doesn't, like you said, doesn't totally own that character. So they can't do something like that. That is probably against the rules. Also, too, like I said, think about all the stuff that has Spider-Man, Peter Parker licenses and stuff. It's bigger than the comics. The comics are like awesome. I love them. I'm surrounded by them. But that's not what's making the money. So
And yeah, you mentioned the power of the studio because that was a situation I remember because for a long time Marvel didn't own Disney didn't own the rights to X-Men, so
that's right.
they canceled a lot of the X-Men comics and tried to push more of the Inhumans and
That's
tried to
correct.
push that in the TV shows like
Yep.
Agents of Shield and everything like that. It's like Inhumans because we don't want the X-Men to gain light because we don't want another company to really make
Which
a lot
is
of
really shady.
Yeah.
And that's yeah, but they didn't own X-Men again until they bought Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
yeah. Which I'm
Um
I'm like, can we get a X-Men Aliens crossover? Can we get that? Because I mean, essentially, that's what they were trying to do with the Brood anyway, right? That's the that's the Brood is just alien, right? So I was like, because Fox owns both of those, right? So you can actually do a Predator versus Wolverine movie. Let's do that. you
let's
know,
do some you want some crazy stuff like that? Yeah, Wolverine versus Predator. Yeah, why not? I mean,
I'm
yeah.
just saying, why not? They did it in
Yeah.
the comic books. They have Batman versus Predator in the comic books. Why not? Why can't we do something like that? They can, because you can have the X Files and the X Men, because
Oh
Disney
yeah.
owns both of those.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
With this
Sorry,
kind
I
of
got really I'm a big nerd, by the way. So
that's no problem. I love it. That's no problem. So with this kind of big boom that we've seen of a lot of different stuff of all these comic book properties, movies, shows, everything like that. Why don't you think that's translated into actual comic book sales, and then people actually going to pick up comic books and reading more and everything like that? You think?
that is a difficult question, right? So, hmm, I think there's a lot of different factors, right? So one of the things is there's a lot more competition. So when comics were like, there was one particular point in American history when comics were selling in the millions. Like everybody read comics, just like how it is in Japan and like France, right? Because are you familiar with like the French market of comics?
Oh no, I'm not too much.
It's envious. I'm envious of it. It's you walk into like a French comic book store. It's like walking into a Barnes and Noble.
Mm,
It's massive, and they everybody reads comics, and it's an art form, because it's treated like it's actually respectable. You know, several things that happened to our form is like, you know, in the 1950s, of course, with the Senate subcommittee hearings where they forced comics to self censor because they said that they were making kids into juvenile delinquents, right? That was so basically they created the Comics Code Authority to self censor comics. So they took all of the piss and vinegar out of comics, all the creativity and everything went to the superhero. So now people conflate a genre with a medium, right? So you
mm,
say comics, people are like, oh, superheroes, funny animals,
yeah.
that's one of the things, right? So they don't look at it as a legitimate medium. Like people like they still make comic books. And that's because what happens also is that in the 1970s, late 1970s, comic books stopped being sold on the newsstands and everywhere. Like remember, like you could actually, I mean, back for me, back in the day, I used to go get my comic books from a stop and go. I used to go
Mm,
to a gas station and get comics, you know. But when the direct market happens, a lot of people, a lot of people color. I didn't have a comic book store in my small hometown in Mississippi, right? I got my comics from the newsstand, right? So what
mhm,
happens in the 1970s is you move them into these like specialty shops, a lot of them in the suburbs, actually. A lot of kids of color did not have access to them, until much later. I wasn't able to get a comic book until I went to like graduate school, which is like many years later, right? I didn't even think they still made them because they like disappeared.
mm,
So you have that too, where it's like access. The other thing is like people are really interested in manga for whatever reason. So I'm not a big manga fan, but it's a manga is like has taken over like that particular aspect of like young readers' sensibilities actually because it's coming from this other space. It's a lot more of it, and it's a lot more diverse, right? So the mainstream comics industry still suffers from the mislabeling of it being like a juvenile medium that only deals with like muscle bound people in tights beating up on each other. That's very limited.
yeah.
Whereas like the medium of comics is huge, right? The medium of comics is massive. Um, I mean, you can do a comic book about anything, but what's happened though is like people have really short sighted ideas about what comics can do and what kind of stories they can tell. And that's part of it as well. So I think those different factors, like having so much competition, it's very difficult to like build that audience, right? Um, yeah, because it's a stigma that has stuck with comics since the 1950s about it being a juvenile medium, and then access and all these different these other things. But yeah, and then people have a was they think of illustrated fiction and comics as being like for the unintelligent. You know
Mm,
what I'm saying? They don't think about it as being a different type of medium, a different type of storytelling. Like for instance, you look at our setup right now, right? We're in a comic book right now. You have two panels, like me and you are panels.
mhm,
We have we have these tags under us. We have this stuff at the top here. We got this information at the bottom. We're actually like processing different types of information simultaneously, right?
yeah.
It's what they call multimodal literacy, which is what we had to develop when we living in a hypersensitive, like hyper speed, like world that we're living in right now. Comics can help you get that particular type of literacy very quickly because sometimes the words are doing different things than the images, right? Or sometimes they're read together. So you're reading the page, you're actually reading these different things happening at the same time. It's a very, very smart way to tell a story. But for a lot of people, it's just Superman or Mickey Mouse. So those are the issues. Those are the issues.
Yeah.
They make me upset. So
I want to talk to you further about just about the medium of comic books, but before I get to that point, I just want to address another point that you said in your talking there
mhm.
about because you mentioned manga. how that's doing really well. And then before that, you also mentioned original characters. Nobody wants original characters, but I was gonna say, like with manga, you do see a lot of original stuff there, and a lot of people picking that up with, and then you see a lot of these manga characters now becoming now almost internationally recognized figures. And manga, and anime and manga is way more popular than it was. It has this huge boom too. So, what do you think that is? Because like you have characters. I know you say you don't read manga, but you do have people like Goku and Luffy from One Piece and things
Yeah,
like
I've
that
heard of
now.
those. I've heard of those characters. You know,
Okay.
it's funny because I was at a, I was at New York Comic Con, and there was this massive image, this statue of One Piece. I didn't know who it was. I just took a picture of it because I thought it was cool. And then when I posted it on Instagram, I got all these hits. One Piece, One Piece, One Piece. I'm like, what? Who is this character? That's hilarious. And I guess there's a Netflix show now, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
made
yeah.
it into live action, yeah.
So yeah, live action Netflix thing. So I don't know. This thing about manga is really interesting to me. Like the Japanese won the culture. Well, I guess we both did because all they kids are spinning on their heads and doing hip hop, and we're into manga, right? And anime. And don't get me wrong, I do love some of the anime films from back in the day. Like I'm a big fan of like stuff like Akira and like
Perfect Blue.
Paprika and Perfect Blue. These really beautiful. Miyazaki's work is gorgeous, and also too, I'm a big Junji Ito fan. So I do read some. But I think that there's something that the ubiquitous nature of it, like back in the day when there was borders and stuff, people would actually literally go to borders and just read the manga section all the time. They wouldn't buy them, but
Right.
they'll just go and read. It'd be like they treat it like a library. The other thing too is that there's a lot of like access to manga online for free as well, which I think also has perpetuated that thing too. I think one thing I would have to say about people that publish manga is they take better care of their fans as well. So, for
Mm.
instance, what's the type of like mangaka that where the fans can make it too?
I wouldn't, they can make it as
Yeah, yeah.
well?
So basically, it's like fan fiction that's supported by the publisher,
Mm,
where they will actually let you publish. I think they get a percentage of it or something, but they will actually let you make fan fiction
okay.
and publish it. So there's stuff like that where they actually take care of the fans a lot better, which I thought was kind of cool. So when I said that nobody wants the new characters, I meant like in the superhero, in the mainstream. The people who are reading superhero comics really just want the same thing over and over. I feel that way. Like they just want to. They don't want anything to change. And if you think about it, like manga is about change, right? It's a bunch of it. It's always shifting. It's the same story, but it's always like there's a lot of things that are changing. Superheroes are like stuck in amber. Think about it. Like, Peter Parker is how old again? Like, how old is Batman? Batman was created in 1939. He's perpetually young, and they
Right.
always so in order
Rebooting.
for them to get new readers, right? You
Right.
have to actually like either come up with a younger version of them, like Robin or like Nightwing or something like that, and bring them in Red Hood or whatever. To bring new readers in. Or you realize too that, you know, demographically, and I know that people, that racist people don't like to hear this, but we are browning. I'm sorry, but America is becoming a browner space. You know, I think white people become like a ethnic minority in like the year 2045 or something like that. I think that's what the projections are. Yeah,
Possibly, yeah. I
yeah.
think
So it's not like no one's trying to replace anybody, but you know, there's a lot of melanin in America, and so that's one of the pushbacks too, where it's like you're gonna take my Captain America and you're gonna take my country. I'm like, okay, no, it's not that serious. Actually, we're just living, right? We're Americans as well. So if they want to get like new characters, they create. I mean, you have this thing where you have to like maintain the character to a certain degree because you have licenses, but you also have the thing you want to grow your audience, right?
right.
And the old audience for comics is graying and dying, just like the old audiences for old school hip hop are now grandfathers and stuff, right? So you have this progression of people who want things to stay the same, and you have the things that where you're trying to like create a new audience. So what do? You have to create these spin-offs. So okay, we tried to create new characters, nobody wanted them, right? So we need to create we need to build off this brand and create like Kid Flash, and now Aqualad is black and queer, right?
Right.
So and you have like a Mexican Blue Beetle that's actually pretty popular, or a lesbian Latina version of this question, right? The Montoya version of the question. So you're trying to speak to these different characters, and different demographics, but also still keep the brand of the. It's a very like difficult thing to do. Manga is doing it automatically because it's already kind of like exoticized anyway because it's cool. It comes from another country and you read it backwards and it's so much of it and it's like it's really like so you can have all kinds of different types of manga. Like you could have like adult manga, you have a manga for kids, you got manga for housewives, you have mangas for cooks, everybody.
Romance, manga.
Romance, exactly.
Yeah.
Romance used to be a big aspect of comics in our in our country. Men used to read romance comics. Men created romance comics. That was a big thing back in the day. So we killed comics because we felt that they were messing up our kids because America's like always been super conservative in a certain way and was like, no, these comics are going to change everything. Oh my God.
Uh,
Batman and Robin are gay. It's going to make everybody gay. I'm like, what? No, that's not what's happening. But no, but seriously though, I think the manga gives people a broader spectrum
mhm,
of the new, and it's always new to somebody. I always say like somebody right now is listening to Prince for the first time ever.
right.
For the
Yeah.
first time, somebody in the world right now has never heard Prince before. Is put on Purple Rain and their mind is being blown right now. You know,
Yeah.
so that's what I.
Yeah.
All
Um,
right.
yeah. Because to that point, before I go into my next question for you, because I think it was Lil Yachty, I think it was, who's a rapper, by the way.
I know
Uh,
who Lil Yachty is. Ain't
um,
that Timo?
and then he was talking. I think he said that he heard Pink Floyd for the first time, and he was like, that really kind of changed his mind, blew his mind there. And
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that it's good for, and I'm just talking about from Black people here for a second, just Black people to span, to go around, look at all these different influences, not just stay in a bubble there. And I think that's kind of the worst thing, and maybe even a misconception that Black people do this, and certain groups of people do this, and other groups of people don't do these other things. I think that's damaging there. So
yeah,
it's
I
always
agree.
good to kinda, branch out there and do different things. And my other point there, that I was gonna bring up another question. So, like, yeah, you see this kind of influence there with manga, especially with younger kids, and then the anime, and then, you get hooked there, that translation. And there's so many different forms of manga that you can read there. So do you think that the main thing with comics is that it's just the older people kinda complaining more, that you're not like, they're not doing a good job of connecting to the younger kids and getting them hooked on the stuff? Because when I was growing up, the way I got into comic books was through the animated stuff. Static Shock, Justice League, the animated series, Batman, the animated series,
Most people still do.
Batman Beyond, that
Yep.
type of stuff, and that kinda, and then I know a lot of people, when you speak about the Green Lantern movie, you talk about your mom saying, like, you wanna go see that. When that happened, they were like, "Wait, he's white?" Like,
Right.
a lot of people didn't know that, there was a different versions of Green Lantern. So
Right.
do you think it just struggles with a lot of comic books, the 2 big companies especially struggle with hooking the younger kids? Because that's really what you gotta go with, because that's your future audience.
Those are your
And
future audience. I go back and forth about it. I think what's happened is because of the success of the video games and the cartoons and the films, you do have a massive like following of young folk. Like my little cousin, she is let's see, she's out of school now. So she's gotta be like 18. She one of the biggest Marvel heads. She don't read the comics though, you know. She's a
mm,
big Marvel fan though. She loves those movies. So and she loves the video games. And I think what happens, I said, well, you need to read the graphic novels then. She didn't really know about that. And so she I think she started reading Spider-Man and stuff like that now. So what it is that, like I said, these the main the direct market is dwindling. Like, we have like closures, like comic book stores are closing. Diamond, because of COVID, had to do some different things with how they do distributing stuff, and like Marvel is like now being distributed by Penguin Random House. DC has its own distribution company, so you know you've seen like a massive shift, like a tectonic shift in what's happening in mainstream comics, and it's really kind of a wild west right now. People are trying to figure out things, and Kickstarter is a big game changer as well. I would say that the most interesting things in comics for like adults are happening in the trade presses. Like we're making some great books. Megascope is making great books. We just put out an Afrofuturist Count of Monte Cristo book. And it's really good, right? We're getting ready to drop an Anansi the Spider horror story, right? For adults, it's not for kids, right? So we're working on Emmett Till graphic novel right now, stuff like that. So, we are trying to shake up the market. But you also have stuff like Kickstarter with like the you let the audience vote. But then you also have like successful endeavors like with Kickstarter with like Rippaverse. I mean, brothers made a lot of money. Um, I have to say. And but you also have like really successful folk like Richard Kirkman with The Walking Dead, where it's like he has a contract where he owns The Walking Dead. Image is putting out the comics, you know?
Mm.
So it's a very different it's a very different landscape right now. And I think honestly, like Marvel and DC don't necessarily have to they don't necessarily have to make better comics actually, or make do or do the things that people want them to do, because that's not where their main money comes from. They got theme parks. My kid has like you know incredible Hulk pull-ups right now. You know what I'm saying? So they selling those characters. They're selling those characters, but not necessarily in the main in the direct market. So, and those that's a danger. That's a space right now where there's just enough for you to actually to make a little bit of money, but it's a system that actually has a lot of issues, and for good or ill, things are going to have to shift to kind of make up for that. It's difficult to make money in comics too. So
Yeah. Um, Go back with something you said about comic books as a medium.
yes,
And you see that. So I feel like it's the way you kind of talk about it. I saw another interview when you spoke about this as well. Um, and do you think that's just primarily kind of a Western type of thing? Because we also have that kind of outlook on animation. Like animation is just for kids. It's not just a medium to tell a story. But then over in Japan, to bring up Japan again, you see
I
something like
mean,
Hayao Miyazaki with The Boy and the Heron or his other various works that
I
it's
mean, I hear that Blue Eye Samurai is like a masterpiece, right? I'm like, I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see it. Like my dude David Walker was telling me, like, "Yo, this is amazing. You need to see it immediately." So, I respect his opinion. So I'm gonna check it out. So yes, that's what it is. Um, our society has been known to be very short-sighted because you think about it. I mean, we were started by these really conservative, like religious folk, the Pilgrims,
mm,
right? Like really, really conservative. So, you know, uh, we we're not teaching critical thinking properly in schools. You know what I'm saying? We're teaching indoctrination and stuff like that. We're scared of things that are different, that are quote unquote different from us. So that's ingrained in the culture. It's like we're supposed to be a free thinking society, but we should have free education. We should have free healthcare. This kind of stuff. Like we're like behind the times, but we're acting like we're not. And that's what the thing is too. And so I think sometimes because the superhero represents like a particular type of like nostalgia for the good old days, that people are hanging on to that idea. But I'm like, we need to grow past that, man. I mean, you're missing so many things. Like I'm trying to make comics that are like groundbreaking and stuff, right? That actually like change how we look at the medium. It's a medium, it's not a genre, and people like don't understand that. So if I give them, say, like, our book Queenie that we put out um, is up for an NAACP Image Award this year. It's our second nomination. It's the story of Stephanie St. Clair, and she was a gangster in Harlem, right back in the 1920s. So that's not for kids, but it's a really, really beautifully told story. So there you have it. But anyway, I don't know, I could talk about that all night. So
uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, what do you think needs to be done to kind of change that? Because you do have a lot of comic books there that are, not just like superheroes that do get popular. You do have stuff like Saga that got very popular. Um, you did have ones that have been turned into movies that not many people would think of when they first hear comic book movies, like
like Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition, A History of Violence,
Yeah,
Ghost World,
yeah,
stuff like that. So, what do you
yeah.
think kind of needs to be done to kind of change that?
Oh man, that's a tough question too. Because again, people are so distracted, by so many different things. Um, there's so much prejudice against the medium, I think, in our country that we need to work through that. We need to it's about educating, and a lot of it's in schools too. I think what's happened now is a lot of people like myself who grew up reading comics are now implementing, like my students read some of the first graphic novels that they ever read in my classes, right? Because I teach courses on comics, so some of the first comics that they've ever opened are in college, right? That's crazy to me. So I think what needs to happen is we need to think broadly about how we're educating people about what good art is, but that happens on like the educational level, and education, you talk about a system that is broken intentionally. The education system is beautifully broken. It's broken to function the way it was designed. So it's like it's a tough road, and the thing is too is like getting people's eyes and ears out. Everybody's not going to comic book conventions. Everybody's not going to American Library Association. We have to go where the people are, and really say, I just did a talk I do talks at libraries because that's where people gather to kind of learn information sometimes. So, I just did a talk 2 weeks ago about Afrofuturism in comics. So we have to be, evangelists of comics as a medium and get the good word out. But it's going to be a lot of work because people are so set in their ways. People don't like to change. Change is difficult. People won't change unless they're forced to. Seriously, that's what it is. And so until something really, really big happens and stuff, we're going to be having to fight this battle. Because I've been fighting this battle since the '90s, in particular, about comics and education. Like people are like, wait, people still make comics? Wait, that's a comic book? I used to read comic book. It was read Casper the Ghost. I said I used to read that too, along with everything else. But uh, it's a difficult conversation because people still don't think of it as something that someone who's smart would read. You know, when you give them Mouse or you give them like Stuck Rubber Baby or the Sandman, and they're like, "Whoa, what is? What am I reading?" That kind of thing. So,
Yeah, especially something more modern instead of
oh yeah,
something more way back, like I guess Watchmen. I guess consider that's more older classic stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that there. Yeah, I don't want to keep you for too long there. I know we said we only do 30, but I know we went past that.
Yeah, I knew when you said 30 minutes, we are gonna go past. There's no way we're gonna talk for 30 minutes. I'm like,
Everything like that. But yeah, one more time, where can people kind of find you if you want to? What you got coming up next? All your projects, everything like that.
whew, okay. Let's see. Well, you can find me online pretty much everywhere. I'm at John Jennings Art on Instagram. I'm at johnjenningsstudio.com. You can email me there. I'm a public. I work for the public, so you can actually, you can find my email through University of California Riverside pretty easily. You can find me. Yeah, that's my Insta right there. Far as like projects, the main project I'm working on right now is is co-adapting Parable of Talents with Dr. Damien Duffy and David Brame right now. We're working very hard to get that done. That's the follow-up to Parable of the Sower, which, like I said, this one is the Hugo Award for best graphic novel. Me and Angelique are in the throes of like working with a new editor on getting my superheroes black out as well. And also I'm writing some other stuff. I'm working on a new like horror miniseries with Vault right now. And we'll talk about that a little bit more once, but I'm writing that. And yeah, those are some of the bigger things. I'm always making art. I got a lot of plans to make my own stuff. Yeah, and you can pick up stuff like Civil Surfer Ghostlight right now. And also I'm, curating work for Megascope right now too. So our next big release is uh, this book called Devour, written by Jasmine Joyner and illustrated by Anthony Pugh. So that drops in May. And I'm helping to put together the Schaumburg Black Comic Book Festival right now too. So that happens in April, like late April, 26th and 27th. So, yep.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Hopefully much success to you. You see a lot of kind of black creators out there doing a lot of great things. Kind of coming up more and more. I hope to see that, and not only just in the medium of comic books, but in film and television.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people kind of talk about that of like, I saw this really head ass kind of tweet of like, white people have shows like Succession and The Bear, and like what's our kind of equivalent to that, and then
Yeah.
and movies and especially like you have things like American Fiction, which, I don't know how many people have seen American Fiction. You know what
It's
I mean?
really good.
It's a great
It's so
film.
good. I was
Uh,
like, wow. I loved it.
yeah,
Absolutely loved it.
yeah. So great things. So yeah, thank you again for your time there, Mr. Jennings. Take care and have a great one.
You too, Josh. Thank you so much for having me.